All right, so I think some people are still joining in, but I think we're ready to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy World Space Week. This is an exciting week for us. My name is Alina. I am one of the directors at Students for the Exploration and Development of Space Canada, also known as SEDS-Canada. At SEDS-Canada, we work on creating opportunities for post-secondary students to engage in the Canadian space sector across either the government, industry, or academic sectors. And as many of you know, I'm sure the theme for this year's World Space Week is Satellites Improve Life. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Before we begin, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping items. So we have three wonderful speakers today, and they're going to give their presentations. And then we're going to have a Q&A period at the very end. We please ask you to keep your microphones muted and your videos off during the presentations, but we do encourage you to use the chat option to send in your questions during the presentations so that we can facilitate the Q&A period at the end. And if we experience any technical difficulties, please bear with us as we try to establish the connection again. And now I'll pass it on to my co-host, Zaid, for him to introduce himself and also introduce our speakers today.
Great, thank you, Alina. Hi, everyone. We're excited to have you on board today for this webinar. My name is Zaid, and I'm one of the national point of contact for Canada with the Space Generation Advisory Council, or the SGAC. The SGAC is a global network of students and young professionals, and we primarily work to advocate and interface youth to the United Nations, space agencies, industry, and academia all over the world. We have today 3 brilliant speakers spanning from across the industry, government, and academia, as well as the commercial sector with startup scenes. Our first speaker in line is Taryn Tomlinson, Senior Engineer at the Canadian Space Agency, followed by Kelly Lucina, co-founder and Chief of Engineering at Wyvern Space. And finally, we have Michelle Mendez, the Executive Director at Satellite Canada Innovation Network. We're hoping that the diversity of the panel's members' background will infuse various perspectives and give you a bit of highlight in terms of how space is utilized in improving our day-to-day life, but also more importantly, in different ways that you can interact and engage with the space sector. So it's not always rocket science, it's not purely science and engineering. You might find yourself surprised, and we're excited to have our first speaker in line, Taryn Tomlinson, to start with her presentation and take it away. And from there, we'll move across the presentation and have a Q&A towards the end.
Wonderful.
So Taryn, go ahead with
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the presentation, you can see it. It's okay?
Yep.
All right. So, well, I have to first of all say thank you for the invite, and indeed, happy Space Week. I'm so pleased to be here, and I have to be honest, some of my best recruits have come from SGAC and SEDS. I have some incredible people fueling work that we're doing at the Space Agency, plucked directly from your ranks. So I am such a supporter of these two organizations, and so proud to be here tonight. I also want to mention that I'm really happy to be a part of a panel with Michelle and Kelly, and I will speak about them shortly because they're part of a story that I'm going to tell. And I'm just going to take a moment to shuffle some things around in mission control here so that I can see everything properly. Thank you. So tonight I asked myself, how do I want to bring this up with all of you? So what would you really want to hear if the space agency was talking to you about satellites improving life? And if I were you, I would want to hear that the federal government is really doing something drastically different, perhaps, in order to build the future, not of just of satellites, but everything that satellites enable, all the way down the chain, right? We're not just talking about instruments, we're talking about a whole value chain, that all the way to the brains that are in your minds that are going to be contributing to this in the future. And I'm sure you want to hear about how you can be part of it. So on that note, here goes a short story that I'll tell. And it begins with the fact that I started at the Space Agency unapologetically as a robotics engineer, working to put Dexter up to the space station in 2008. And in 2016, the president asked me to serve as chief of staff. And that opened my mind and my doors to the whole other side of what the Canadian Space Agency does, which is space utilization. This whole space sector that works together to deliver services and benefits to Canadians. And part of being chief of staff was hearing about great upstart companies like Wyvern. And I met Kelly and Chris Robson and heard about their incredible small companies starting up. And then he talked to me about movers and shakers like Michelle Mendes, who was all across, influencing all across the whole landscape. And so my story really begins in this, really in full capacity on this topic just a few years ago. So I'm going to walk you through it, the appreciation that I have built over just a few years, what I've heard and where we're going. And hopefully you're going to walk away from this and say, that wasn't just a boring little presentation by the government. There's really something in it for me and for the whole country at large. So going on to my next, so I'll take a few minutes per slide. I've got about 5 slides. I'm going to share the appreciation for what I've learned. Space remains the only vantage point from which we can collect data about our planet on a global scale. Satellites are designed and positioned to enable collection of large amounts of information about the Earth. And we sometimes put those in polar orbit, or we can put them in these highly elliptical orbit to go and reach the great north. And it allows us to collect information of our changing planet, minute by minute, day by day, decade by decade. Put that data in a cube over time, and you've got incredible information at your fingertips. Worldwide, we're quickly moving in the ways that we can monitor. So think about these words: monitor, survey, forecast, but to a greater extent, predict our changing planet. And the prediction piece is so much of what you're going to be involved in the future. In Canada, we have a population scattered across 100 million square kilometers. So look at this image. This image was made with RadarSat data. It is this incredible look at this giant country that we're trying to take care of, this whole planet that we're trying to take care of from this vantage point from above. It requires that we're constantly monitoring, and we are relying heavily on space-based Earth observation data, SBEO. So I'll throw out the acronym SBEO. I always have to put those up front so that you can follow. But SBEO has been a word that is now caught on all across government. And as I tell my story, you'll understand why. We're using our vast network of satellites for monitoring surveillance. And this space infrastructure is critical. And the government is now agreeing to use those terms. Critical space infrastructure, just like the Canadian Pacific railroads were built to connect our nation over 100 years ago. Space data today is often compared to a modern day gold rush. Like, the data is like gold. It's got incredible value in our digital economy. And most importantly, it has socioeconomic value. Data generated by our satellites have become critical to the delivery of the mandates of many government departments, ones that you must appreciate as I go through my presentation, and you'll say, oh, that service is critical. That information we can't live without. Our recently launched RCM satellites a year ago, we put up a satellite constellation with synthetic aperture radar technology. It's vital to 61 government services across 11 departments, and I'm going to talk about those at the end. So I've developed this deep appreciation over 2 years, and I've done that by spending the last 2 years working on building a federal partnership, and it was led by our vice president. So our president said, okay, Taryn, you finished your 2-year mandate, chief of staff. You go work with the vice president and you are going to build a partnership like we've never built before across the federal departments. We did an amazing thing over the last 2 years. We listened to needs of all the other government departments, and it's amazing what listening does. It's a powerful force. We should do it more often. It leads me to my second slide, and it's to talk to you about how we're building a federal vision with 16 other government departments. To realize this vision, it requires a long-term comprehensive, prioritized investment and a strategy that will position Canada as a global leader in SBEO. So we've put a snapshot of the vision here, but I'm not going to read off the slide. I just want to talk to you about what we're doing. We're committed to charting a new course for SBEO that strengthens our federal services, the 61 services and growing. But at the same time, we need to provide a landscape that's necessary for industry, academia, and governments across Canada, provincial, territorial, Indigenous governments, and world-class experts in technology and science, all coming towards this vision collectively. This Canada's space strategy was released a year and a half ago. And if you're not familiar with it, go online and check it out. But the fifth pillar of the strategy wasn't funded. The first pillar of the strategy, which was robotics and the Canadarm3, we all heard about the announcement in the news. But the fifth pillar goes as quoted, ensure Canada's leadership in acquiring and using space-based data to support science excellence, innovation, and economic growth. This is what this 2-year commitment of this entire team that I'm on is all about, is delivering on the fifth pillar. As part of that commitment, and if you read underneath it, there are many goals that are associated with it, and those might ring true for you. There are things like collecting climate change data from space, prioritize the future Earth observation capabilities, so grow the capacities that you're going to hear Callie talk about and that you're going to hear Michelle talk about, the capabilities that we need you to invest yourselves in so that you can learn and we'll transfer that knowledge onto you. And as it grows, and support the excellence in data analytics. This is a new field, not a new field, but using space-based data, it's really new what we can do with it. And support space science to study Earth and beyond. All right, so this is the vision. Moving on to the next slide. I'm going to talk for a minute about the economic well-being and capacity in SBEO. It's not only about increasing what government can do with its services, but it's about providing a healthy landscape for Canadian companies and researchers, which many of you will become, working with the data in order to develop solutions that generate economic activity. So we're talking about significant economic activity that revolves around capturing and transforming satellite data. We need to advance our EO infrastructure. So that's not just what's in the sky. That's what's on the ground. That goes all the way out to the apps that Callie's going to talk about. It's also our workforce. It's the people. We need to invest in these people. And this helps us grow our digital economy. And it aligns us to what the priorities are of the government, even right now in the pandemic. We are rebuilding Canada. And I'd be remiss to do a presentation without appealing to all the engineers out there who said she didn't even show us the satellites. So I'll show you the satellites. So let's talk about them for a minute. I'm 10 minutes in, so I've got another 5 minutes. So I can talk about hardware, and I love to. So we are going to talk about the satellites that both Canada has built and ones that we're contributing to international. And to keep it quick, the RadarSat constellation that was launched a year ago are the 3 little sisters over on the left. And those are replacements for the growing, aging Big Brother RadarSat 2 that's in the middle from 2007. RadarSat 1 is already out of commission. These satellites use that amazing technology called synthetic aperture radar. And it's an active sensor system that's rebounding radar signals and building 3D maps that are seeing everything, the changing ecosystems, the changing landscape of our entire country, the ice thickness, the ice melt. There's so much data we're getting from our RadarSat satellites to cover really critical needs for our government. Over on the right, we see SciSat. SciSat monitors the environment around it. So it's helping and has been helping for 17 years deliver on essential climate variables that are so important for us to meet our international commitments. And up on the top, I could talk through these satellites all day long, but I'll make it quick. Look at SWAT right there. That's going to be launched in 2 years. It's a partnership with NASA, the French Space Agency, and UK. And there are multiple instruments on board, of which one is Canadian. And we are going to map 90% of the Earth's water with that satellite alone over the next decade. Talk about a superpower. And then you look across at Terra, this incredible NASA instrument, 5 huge instruments on board. That satellite, the Moppet satellite instrument is the Canadian piece, which is monitoring pollution. So we have this whole fleet up there, and the fleet is contributing to services that are critical to everyday needs for Canadians. These are truly superpowers. Just to say something else about RCM, because I have a couple of facts and I might as well throw them out there. We collect 250,000 images of the Earth annually. These are synthetic aperture 3D images. It's just quite incredible what we're going to be doing with that. And it's only just becoming available now that it's been commissioned. So I'll go on to the last 2 slides that I have. Callie's going to speak about applications, but I'm going to talk about them briefly from the government standpoint. To be concrete, we need to move data into an operational basis in the government. And what comes to mind for me, the things that we need to continue to be operational and augment their operational capacity includes things like the annual crop inventory, which is already in place and has been really advantageous to farmers across Canada. We need to provide imagery constantly to support deployed Canadian forces and personnel, both at home and abroad, for emergency response, for them to deliver on their critical services. We need to monitor maritime approaches for suspicious activity and pollution. We need to help continue to create these maps of ice and ice in the north so that ships can get through. And we've been doing it for decades. We need to continue. We need to monitor sea conditions to inform weather forecasting models, support disaster response and mitigation, monitor the vast country for impacts of climate change, of course. And if you were to ask me what's my hope for the future, I was listening to those other government departments who have so many problems that we're trying to solve. And some of them were, can your satellites help us monitor and protect the whales? Can you help us detect the plastics that are out in the oceans? The answer is, we can try. We've got some technologies. We're going to continue to work towards those things. My last slide is to say that the Government of Canada has some of the world's foremost experts in space-based data analytics. Collectively, we are demonstrating Canada's leadership in space, but we need to maintain and grow this leadership. And your takeaway today is to evolve use of space data to address national challenges like tracking and protecting whales or whatever the next challenge may be, to create new products and services to enhance productivity and sustainable practice in all the sectors that I named, and be at the forefront as we tap into this rich source of data, because doing so is essential for competing in the new digital reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taryn, so much for a wonderful presentation. Fun fact, I recently saw some whales just in Stanley Park in Vancouver. So yes, let's protect our whales. I just want to quickly remind everyone to use the chat feature if you have any questions for the speakers in the meanwhile. And with that, we can pass it on to our next speaker, Callie, who is the co-founder and chief of engineering at Wyvern Space. Callie, go ahead and you can share your screen.
Thank you. Is that all right?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So the theme of satellites improving life was incredibly easy to incorporate into my presentation because that is pretty much exactly what my team at Wyvern has been working on for the last few years. I'm Callie, a co-founder of Wyvern, and I'll tell you a little bit about the company and about how it ties into this World Space Week theme so well. So if you're wondering what the company Wyvern does, we are addressing a need in the Earth observation data market by providing the specific type of data that'll make the insights from the data sets more actionable, because Taryn articulated so well how many potential uses there are for this data, but we still need to have the right resolution, the right spectral content, the right revisit rate, the right type of orbit. And we really need a step change in the imaging technology to be able to provide that, such that we can have all those right specs available for the extremely wide range of applications and be able to integrate it through all the other steps in the data pipeline down to the end user. And so Wyvern is developing a new satellite imaging technology to specifically fill some niches so we can start making those insights really actionable. In this presentation, I'm going to give a general survey of applications that Wyvern has looked into over the last little bit, because basically to understand our customers as a startup, we've been looking at who is interested in insights from Earth observation data. So we've covered, like, just because we didn't want to leave any stones unturned, we've at least kind of looked at a whole range of potential uses of our data. So I'm going to cover a handful of them. But first, I'm going to introduce to you the team, because seeing as this is geared towards students and young professionals, I think I have a lot in common with a lot of you who are listening right now. So we are a pretty young company. We were founded in 2018, and the 4 co-founders who are pictured here, we met as undergraduate students at the University of Alberta, and 3 out of the 4 of us met in AlbertaSat, the CubeSat project at the University of Alberta. And so we have a little bit of experience designing and building satellites, and we wanted to continue doing that. And so we founded our own company based here, and Curtis was the missing piece in the company. And so he joined the 3 of us from AlbertaSat, and off we went. And there's now 8 of us on the team. And so here is what we're working on. So one of the things we discovered is there's a huge need for Earth observation data in the oil sands and mining industries. I am from Alberta, and I'm in Alberta right now, so this is the Albertan portion of the presentation. There's a lot of tailings ponds in northern Alberta especially, and the ecosystems are altered because of the mining and basically like oil sands operations, and we need to get those ecosystems back to their original states over time. And so you can send people or even drones out to cover these vast areas of land to monitor the regrowth over time, and also for worker safety. So you can understand where the tailings ponds beaches are, so you can plan transportation routes around them. However, sending people out or even flying a drone becomes really costly because you're covering huge parts of our province. You want something that's going to fly overhead and cover the whole area really quickly and cheaply. So the investment by building a satellite to do that pays off really quickly. We just need that infrastructure to be in place. You can do other cool things like identify plant stress and basically just monitor how plants and animals are starting to re-inhabit the reclaimed areas, which makes sure that we're really following through with our plans to rehabilitate the altered land. Also with spectral, like certain spectral content, you can identify mineral deposits underground and identify exactly what materials you're looking at in a prospective mine site very quickly over large areas. And that way you can just do less damage because you can drill exactly where you need to get what you're looking for. And so you can make this entire process much more environmentally friendly and also more economic for the companies too, because they're saving money by getting this data really cheaply. But that just requires the infrastructure to be in place. So we, the people in this call, need to work to get that all built so that this is more of an opportunity for the companies. Along similar lines, those oil products need to be transported, sometimes very long distances. So there's pipelines to do that, and you want to monitor for encroachment on your pipelines. But the problem is these things cover very large areas that are shaped like a noodle, and satellites flying overhead give you noodle-shaped images. So if you have the right constellation, you can really cost effectively actually image an entire pipeline for whichever company is transporting their materials through there. And they'll be able to see whether there's construction that's possibly damaging the pipeline. With certain types of satellites, you can identify leaks really quickly and stop them before they cost the company more money or damage the environment more. So you just need to be able to cover it fast and regularly, which is a potential application of the type of technology that Wyvern is developing. For agriculture, which is bringing the Albertan portion of our presentation to an end. Now we are, like a different application would be, if you have data with the right spectral content and spatial resolution, you can identify what's ailing a crop. So you can even detect specific diseases that will help farmers take action right away to improve their yield. And also in general, you can just farm using less water, less fertilizer, less pesticides, because using images of your farm, you can tell exactly where you need to put those resources. Just on a larger scale, as a planet, we're going to need to feed close to 10 billion people by the year 2050. And so if we don't improve our farming practices to become more efficient, we're going to have a really big problem. And this is one of the missing pieces to help us increase our yields, have farmers just save more money in terms of costs of water and pesticides, and save their own time because they know exactly what their crop needs. Currently, 60% of farmers in North America use GPS-enabled technology. So that's one way that satellite technology is already helping them. But only 10% of farmers in North America currently use imagery from space. And so there's a lot of work to be done filling the need for data. The biggest problem is that, so just one of the problems facing the specific vertical is that depending on the crop, the spectral content and spatial resolution requirements for your data change a lot. And so we just need to make the data available at an affordable price that will meet the needs of the farmers in order for them to be able to unlock the potential higher yields and cost savings. Along the same lines as that agriculture thing, sustainability wise, like we've already talked about land rehabilitation from oil and mining processes, reducing leaks from pipelines, reducing water, fertilizer, and pesticide usage. But the problem is that this data isn't available in a way that's easily integrable into their existing workflows. So we need to not only take the image of the farm, but we need to get it to the farmer. And so to get all of these applications fully utilized, it's going to take, like Taryn was talking about, an entire team of people working on the ground infrastructure and the back end data processing and storage and the distribution and everything that needs to be coupled with the actual space assets to make this possible. So there's a lot of innovation to be done here, and a lot of, like, as you can see, it's just a whole swath of benefits that could come from it. And I haven't even talked about emissions monitoring yet. So emissions monitoring is another application you can do with a slightly different kind of imager. And that obviously is directly applicable to climate change, another aspect of sustainability that I haven't even touched on much. But for now, I'm going to jump into the engineering portion of our program, which is the part that you've probably all been waiting for, to talk about specifically what Wyvern is doing to be able to fulfill some of these needs. So our new satellite technology is designed for CubeSats, and I recognize some of the names in the attendance. Actually, you're working on CubeSats either as part of the Canadian CubeSat project or some other CubeSat club in Canada, so you already know this. But this is a extremely simplified diagram of a 3-unit CubeSat made up of 3 cubes, and we're trying to get the right kind of data at an affordable price. So for it to be more affordable, we thought, let's make a really small satellite. But the problem is you're limited by the number of photons you can trap with your aperture. So on a CubeSat of this size, an aperture is logically going to look about that big. And so your image quality, like signal to noise ratio and other metrics of how, just how much information you're actually capturing and how much you can learn from your image, are determined just by how many photons can make it through that circle. If we want to capture more photons, more light, to get a higher quality image, which is what's needed for a lot of these applications, we don't want to make the satellite bigger. So we thought, what if we have a 3-unit CubeSat, but we have a giant aperture coming out of it that can collect so many more photons? And so our aperture expands in space. We shoot it out into space, fully following the 3-unit international standardized CubeSat form factor. And then we have an expandable aperture that can get higher quality images than previously possible from a more affordable platform. And so we can pursue whichever of these verticals we choose to specialize in first, so that we can make data available in a way that it wasn't before. So just to wrap up here, more actionable information for you personally. I think if you're a student, I would highly recommend getting involved in CubeSat or other space extracurriculars, because that's the entire reason why I'm here. And like I said, that's how 3 out of the 4 of us met. So if you're interested in this, which you probably are because you're attending this session, That's my biggest piece of advice for you. And there's two great organizations here, SEDS and SGAC, that are co-hosting, that are a great way to just get an introduction to other communities of people like you. If you're a young professional attending networking events, a lot of networking events have special, like, cheaper admissions for if you are like a recent grad or young professional. So check those out. And in any case, just maintain connections with people you work well with, because I wouldn't have been a part of Wyvern if I hadn't really clicked with these people and we hadn't stuck together and made sure that our working relationship stayed really good. So you need to have a group of people like that to pursue a project like this, that like, you all need to have the same passion for it, and you all need to know that you like working together. So if you find those people, make sure you stick with them. And in terms of satellites improving life, satellites have definitely improved my life, because they've kept me working on things that I'm so passionate about and enabled me to stay with this group of people that I know I love working with. So our team here at Wyvern has an incredible environment, and just having seen other student CubeSat projects and other startups around Canada, there's a lot of other incredible environments like that. So that's another way that satellites have improved my life, and I think could improve yours if you want to get involved. So if you have questions, feel free to send me an email. And thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you for your presentation, Callie. And very quickly, it's very fascinating from how Taryn mentioned about making data operational. And now we've just heard a great example from your company that is looking across the spectrum for different applications and very much highlighting sustainability and developing those, rendering those data accessible to the end user, and really connecting those dots together. So that's very fascinating to see how these threads are very interconnected, and shows to highlight the collaboration between different players in the industry. Our next speaker is Michelle Mendez, and I will let you kickstart with your presentation.
I'll just share my screen. Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be quite quick with this, and the reason is because I think that a lot of people tend to get a lot out of the question time. So my name is Michelle Mendez, and I'm with Satellite Canada Innovation Network, and we are a not-for-profit organization that has a mandate to drive Canadian global competitiveness in space. So we are here to make sure that Canadian business excels in Canada, and internationally, that Canadian capabilities are known. So I'm going to focus mainly on what might be interesting for you as a young professional, somebody entering the market, or somebody trying to figure out where you might want to go in this area, should you decide to pursue it. So we're here to help young entrepreneurs, startups, SMEs, and we are also very interested in supporting young professionals, because you are the future of the space economy. So making sure that you know and understand where it's going and where it's at is really important. So currently, so this came out yesterday from Bryce Space and Technology. I would recommend that if you are interested in what is going on out there in commercial space, that you take a look at some of the data out there in terms of where the data, as Callie mentioned, is a very big part of space commerce. So the 366 billion that you see here, you can see 74% of that is related to the satellite industry. So if you like television, I have good news for you. It's significantly a big part of the Canadian space market. This is the global market, but Canada excels at communications and Earth observation. That is one of our top specialties and always has been. So there are areas that might be of interest for you to pursue scientifically. And so some of the data out there can help guide you. One of the major roles that science has played in business and finance, which is little known to most of the people that work in business and finance, is that space is critical to business and finance and keeping the economy moving. Without these precision timings, the world markets would fall apart and there would be no economy at all in space or any other sector. So I think that the Die Hard 4 fire sale, the fact that one of the key points was to take down all financial transactions through taking down all the satellites is a really critical lesson for mainstream business. So SADCAN is helping to develop satellite technology. We are the secretariat for the Optical Satcom Consortium. This consortium brings together commercial companies and universities, small companies, even startups, to help develop the next generation of communications technology. They are also working on the technology roadmap for Canada, and the National Research Council is involved with this, and various other agencies and departments. And we are continually expanding this because bringing in as many players in Canada to this to increase not only the intellectual property, but the technology prowess for Canada is critical. So moving on, the support to industry is the core mandate for SADCAN. And what we do is we provide programs to small companies, and those programs come in a variety of shapes and sizes. So one of the programs that we manage is the SADCAN Space Support Program. And the reason why I mention that is because there are certain individuals who have very niche knowledge in areas of satellite technology that can provide consulting service to satellite companies. So what we do is we manage a program on behalf of the National Research Council under their industrial research and development program, and they provide direct support to the companies through the utilization of advisory services through these consultants. So if you do develop a very specific engineering or scientific knowledge throughout your studies or your work, you can, there is a real opportunity in Canada particularly to provide these services to companies directly. So, sorry, somebody took away there we go. So the other area that is really critical is government engagement. Having a country as open and knowledgeable about space as Canada is really to our benefit. Taryn was very correct in her assessment that the Canadian government has been listening for several years now, knowing what is required out there from a commercial standpoint, from a scientific and engineering standpoint, from what do young professionals need to induct them into this very complex industry is very important. And intrinsically, space is going to be tied to national security, so the government will always need to be involved at some level. So having a role in government engagement is very important, and having a government that has the internal knowledge about space and its impact, the socioeconomic impacts and the economic impacts and the national security impacts is going to be critical. So having a role in the government engagement is an area that and especially in law and policy is very important. Some of the challenges that space tends to have is finding the correct or enough commercial support to fuel commercial space. So there's lots of supports out there for young companies that are retail or data companies or AI. Some of these mainstream technologies, space does tend to be a little bit different. And what happens is they immediately fall off the ability to be eligible for some of these programs. So the Canadian government has been very good about adjusting some of those programs, and the ability for some of these small startups like Wyvern have, and I'm not saying that Wyvern has participated in any of them, I'm just saying that when Wyvern first started up, things were very different back then. Some of the areas that would be challenging for the satellite companies that they are facing are launch bottlenecks and the ability to test their hardware in space. Again, the Canadian government was listening, and there have been programs available to support hardware testing. So, oops, sorry about that. So some of the areas that I face on a daily basis are trying to explain to mainstream technology, so out there to the AIs and the machine learnings and the data companies and the law firms and KPMGs out there, to try and explain what space technology can do for them to benefit their business. Kind of what Callie was talking about. Trying to convince some of these agricultural firms that you need to integrate space into your business model because it's cheaper and it's faster and it's better. And sometimes the barriers perceived by some of these mainstream sectors, the barriers seem too high because they don't understand. And so a lot of my time is spent educating a lot of the other professions out there about what space can mean for them and explaining that the barriers are not that high. Conversely, I spend, I don't want to say the other half, but some of my time working with space companies to explain to them that, yes, space is different, but space is not that different. There are some areas of commercial space that they just need to get on with it, and they need to stop thinking that space is super special and that special funding programs need to be made just for them. The commercial space companies that are out there do have a long horizon to return on investment, which can make investors very nervous. But there are other industries that are like that, like the health device industry, for example. So it's about teaching mainstream business that space can be integrated profitably and easily into their business, but it's also training commercial space companies that they too can be a normal business out there. I am so sorry about that. Hello?
Yep, we can still hear you. And we're seeing the presentation.
Sorry about that. Sorry. So finally, my advice to young professionals and to students, like Callie said, stick with what you're seeing in university. Get into some of those electives that may help you dip your toe into some of the areas of technology or science that you may otherwise not be able to do outside of that environment. Also, I would, for those of you that are in scientific mode or in engineering, I would highly recommend that you speak to other disciplines, talk to them about business, finance, and economics, and see how you can integrate space technologies into what they're doing. A lot of new startups have begun like this. And finally, in our travels, like I said, we do try to reach out to young professionals and students. And we had a webinar recently about advancing your career in space. So if you go to our website, you'll see a presentation there done by Remco Timmermans, and there are a number of resources in that PowerPoint that may be helpful to you. So I will leave it at that. And if you want to reach out to SATCAN so that we can, perhaps give you some information, happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation, Michelle. I think it was really brilliant to highlight the business economics aspects and also not the emphasis on being a knowledge broker and communicating with different stakeholders about the value of the applications or satellite technology development, and through programs that SATCAN can mediate. So if you're an up-and-coming startup company looking to find your way, that's an incredible platform to get started with, to be able to engage with other users. That being said, we do have some questions that are coming in. Taryn, the first question is for you. What are some of the up-and-coming satellites or next space technologies that are to follow RadarSat?
Yeah, I would love to speak about that for just a second. Oh, my video wasn't started. So although we haven't announced any major satellite projects, not many, the one exception is that we have announced the next phase of work on WildfireSat. So WildfireSat is going to use microbolometer technology. So it's going to detect heat, which is quite interesting. And we're not certain if this is going to be a constellation. We're still looking at, well, industry is looking at different options, but the idea is to help detect hotspots, help to manage the fire during the outbreak, and overall monitoring. And although what I was talking earlier about highly elliptical orbits, this is something we'd like to look at, changing orbits so that we could be more strategic about how we do our coverage across the planet. We also have the other Scandinavian countries that are really interested in bartering with us with data. As you know, these satellites are so expensive that not everybody can build entire suites of satellites to meet all their needs. The Europeans, they built Copernicus and they meet all their needs with these incredible Sentinel series. The whole suite of technologies are Sentinel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's enviable. We'd all love to be doing that. But Canada is always in a barter situation where we need to work very strategically with partners. And so we buy in on some technologies, barter back for other things in exchange. So I think I'll stop at that and say that WildfireSat is our next big satellite possibility that's in the pipe and being studied. And I think one of your members, I'm just chatting privately on the side to Tahir Morali, who's out in Alberta with a company, 4Pi Lab, that was announced recently that they're supporting some of that development and looking at different concept development. We're still at concept development phase.
Great, thank you. So our next question is for Callie. The question is from Trevor, who grew up in rural Alberta. So the question is the target market for this agriculture image data larger corporate-owned farms, or could it also be smaller family farms as well? And if it's the latter, how do they typically get access to this imaging data?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a couple steps further down the value chain from Wyvern because we sell like images that aren't even processed yet. So our customers are people who are going to take at Wyvern, who are going to take images from us and process them to generate some kind of insight, which would be like put fertilizer here. And so because we don't do the analytics, we can't even sell our product directly to farmers. We sell it to agronomists and to data scientists who will be able to process the image and then give that insight in a more digestible manner to somebody who's actually working in agriculture. But to answer your question, it can be either. It can be smaller farms or large farms because large companies will have their own agronomists who work for them and who can take data sets and gather like what actions should come from that. But small farms can actually subscribe to platforms that use satellite data Like on a subscription type basis, they can get imagery of their farms from those platforms. So like an example of one is called Farmer's Edge. And so we could sell data sets to agronomists at Farmer's Edge who would process it. And then the farmers themselves, like relatively small farms, can sign up to their website. So there's like somebody in between to help gather those customers.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for the question. That was a good one. Our next question, and I think this one is potentially something Michelle, you might be interested in tackling, is what advice would you give to young engineering or young professionals that are not currently working in the space industries and that are interested to get into Canada's space sector? So Callie has mentioned some networking events, and are there some other events or opportunities that you may be able to pinpoint for getting your foot in the door?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the networking aspect with other engineers is critical. SEDS has been a real landmark for that in Canada. I would also say that getting involved with SGAC. And then there are other events that allow students in. I don't know if you are a student. If you're not, I would recommend getting in touch with an organization like ours, depending on what stage you are at your career. And we do get a lot of second and third career people who have worked in different industries. Not always technical, and they are interested in coming into space. One of the things that has happened with COVID, strangely, it's really caused people to look in and evaluate. And we have gotten so many contacts from VPs from some of the top companies out there that, and I'm not talking just Canadian companies, I'm talking, the ones that start with a G and the ones that start with an A. And, these are VPs that, and they may not be located in Canada, but hey, I've always wanted to work in space. What does that look like? So I've spent time speaking with individuals from all over the world, actually. And I tell them to get in contact with organizations that mean something to them. So for example, one of the people was very interested in getting involved in space to fight climate change. So there are organizations out there that you can reach out to, mainly not-for-profits, that can provide you some guidance in that. So I would suggest take a look at the PowerPoint on our website and feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you so much for the detailed answer. And these are some great set of options as well, based on your background and profession. Michelle has listed some incredible options, and definitely Satellite Canada is one to reach out to. Our next question that would be for Taryn is, the Europeans have Copernicus. So the question is more about how is data accessible in Canada, or rather what Canada has to make that data accessible from space assets, and more importantly, how to have those be delivered to other individuals or startups.
We are very preoccupied by that question right now, because the leadership around globally has gone to the principle of open data, and we've known that for many, many years, and it's easy to say open data. But the RADARSAT Constellation mission has a very strong 95% of the data is used for high security DND related data coverage of the planet. And releasing that data openly gives away a lot of information that we have to be very careful with. So what they've come up with, a data policy for the RADARSAT Constellation mission, is to do a vetting process. So it's going to be more intensive than just going open data. They have to make lists of vetted companies, but all Canadian companies can apply. Researchers and anybody affiliated can apply, and they'll go through vetting and they'll put you on the list, and then you have access to the data. That's a bit tricky. But the rest of the government space data is open and free. We've worked very hard to put it on the Canadian Open Portal. There are many, many data sets available to you. Great data sets for research, the SciSat data sets. So in general, my answer is we also believe in an open data policy, and where it's complex and where we're challenged, we're trying to find alternatives.
Awesome, fantastic. That was a great question as well.
Yeah,
it was very fascinating, and it's great to hear these diversity of in terms of interacting with data, working with hardware, but also some of the people working skills in terms of engagement and networking. So it's a brilliant set of diverse things that come into play here, as we can see. Our next question, and we're short of time here, so that would have to be our last question. But that being said, we'll be sure to continue engaging with our speakers on this topic in future webinars. So don't hesitate to continue asking questions. We can perhaps save them for next event. One of the last questions we have is, and this could be potentially something that would be interesting to hear from all our speakers here, if you can all address the kind of training or study career path that you underwent to get into the space sector, or rather, is there specific space programs or graduate programs that is geared towards space studies? And that would be interesting to hear your input on that. And if you have any specific space programs that comes to your mind in Canada that can be pursued. So we can start that off by Callie, if you have any input on that.
Yeah, sure. I kind of smiled when you read the question, because I'm actually still an undergraduate student. So I haven't pursued anything more than a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. I'm still doing that right now. I've heard great things about some of the programs that I see Michelle recommending in the chat. So I do really have to defer this to other people, but I guess the only message I can give is that like, you're not too young, or just because you don't have a fancy qualification doesn't mean you don't have anything to contribute. You have skills from other things that you've learned that'll make you valuable in a team, no matter what they are, as long as you're complementing the other people that you're working with.
Fantastic. And Michelle, how about you? Any input in terms of your own academic development or any recommendation for space programs in Canada to advance into this field?
Well, not to be too biased, I sit on the advisory council for Western Space. So the Institute of Earth and Space Exploration at Western University is one of the top programs out there. And I would highly recommend that you reach out to them. They have a number of very good programs that have been in existence for many years, but they are developing new programs to meet some of the coming needs out there. In addition to that, at McGill University, there is the Institute of Air and Space Law. So for all you lawyers out there, and I know there's probably none, but for space law and policy, this is a huge gap in the market. And Canada's Canada's Institute for Air and Space Law at McGill University is one of the world's top places to study this. So there are a number of other a number of others. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm here if you want to speak.
Brilliant. And it was fantastic to hear about, stepping out of those technical areas. And as you highlighted, there's such a critical need for space lawyers, for individuals that are specializing in economics, that are studying the market. So Michelle, that was a great perspective to put things into context. And finally, Taryn, if you would like to weigh in on this question of training and what kind of academic path you've taken and what kind of space programs in Canada you may be able to recommend.
I think Kelly and Michelle tackled that question really, really well, because they said, open your mind. It's not one path and there's not just one way to do this. I, at the time, when I was a young professional, I thought, about going to university, I figured there was one path, engineering. But that is so not the case anymore. Maybe it wasn't at the time, but it certainly isn't the case of our landscape now. So Michelle's talking about the policy side of things. I just met a very young woman who is an instrumental player and influencer in Ottawa in the policy side of AI, because she felt that AI wasn't being tackled responsibly. So she is now a board member on an OECD board on the policy side of how AI is being handled by countries. So people are penetrating into fields that are just phenomenal through other means and other back doors. I have to mention that if I was going to do it all again, I'd probably go into data science, because I was speaking about data is the gold. It's a gold rush. It's exciting. There's so much you can do. And I do have an engineering mind. I also have a science mind. So I want to solve some of the great challenges, but I want to use engineering solution space to do that. And I can't help but feel like data is the place right now. So we're never too young, as Kelly says, but we're also never too old. And there's always such an opportunity to try new things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this question. And hopefully we've had a broad area of representations and in terms of accessing the space sector. And as you have seen, is there are many non-traditional aspects to go about it. So space is not specific or singular to engineering. It's definitely interesting to hear about the various ways you can connect. That being said, we are going to wrap up our events, and I will let Alina get going with the closing remarks.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say big thank you to our speakers. It's been wonderful to hear your presentations, and thank you so much for spending the time with us here today. I also like to thank all of the participants that joined us, and thank you for all of your questions. I'd like to mention that this is the first webinar in a series of webinars that SEDS-Canada is working on along with SGAC. So please stay tuned on our social media for future webinar events. And if there's any particular topic that you really want to hear about, please feel free to engage with us on social media and yeah, send us your questions or suggestions. And yeah, happy Space Week, everyone. Stay tuned for other events throughout the week as well.
Absolutely. And on that note, once again, as you have probably seen by the speakers and their background, but also the different topics they've covered, space is much more open than it is sometimes portrayed. And there's so many paths you can take. And it's great to see an emphasis being placed as well on some of the non-technical domains that are so critical to bridging our abilities for making the case for space, why space is so prevalent in our life. And even the theme of this World Space Week, improve satellites, improve life, getting that theme to communicate this to everyone else takes a bunch of people from across economics, policies, but also public communication and arts are some of the mediums used to engage with the public. So we are very thankful for our speakers for taking the time. And on a closing note, we would like to ask each of you if you could briefly answer one of the, what is one thing that comes to your mind when it comes to applications of space and something that we do use in our day-to-day life? Starting with Callie, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Despite the fact that I'm in Earth observation, this is the first thing that comes to my mind. It's the most ubiquitous.
Absolutely. And how about you, Taryn?
Unfortunately, same answer, but for me, it's location, location, location. I track my kids and I know they're safe. So it's a really beautiful system that we have all here handheld. And I'm just hoping that a lot of those sustainability apps that we talk about all end up here for every farmer, for every worker, EO data right to the phone.
Fantastic. And Michelle, how about yourself?
I would have to say TV. I need my downtime. So I'm thankful for, so I am thankful for what, I didn't want to repeat what Callie said. I didn't want to repeat what Taryn said. Yeah, I am thankful for my TV, my streaming, and the fact that, you know, we can all unplug into a TV sort of thing. But, and I just wanted to say, I was the former executive director of World Space Week. And I got to tell you that this is a great event, and I'm so glad that you did it. And I just wanted to thank you both for inviting me and inviting us. This is really important to not just Canada, but the world. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. And on that note, we wish everyone a pleasant afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you may be in the world. And it's brilliant that you mentioned streaming. Some of you might be watching this, and we are streaming this using Zoom, and internet connectivity is one another application of space. So that's a great example, Michelle. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar, and stay tuned for our upcoming series of webinars. We will post these across social media. And on that note, once again, we wish everyone a good time. And if you can reflect about one more thing that could be maybe used in your day-to-day life that is improving how you're navigating around yourself, or how you're just improving your own life using satellite applications and space in general, that would be definitely a thought to consider for this for today or for this evening. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to our speakers. Once again, we're very grateful to have had your perspectives to weigh on this topic. Take care, everyone.
Great. Bye, everyone. Thank you.